The gate felt heavier than he remembered. Marcus stood there staring at the house he built with his own 2 hands, 30 years ago. White columns rose like sentinels against the afternoon sky. The driveway curved through manicured lawns that cost more to maintain each month than most people earned in a year. Everything looked perfect, untouched, exactly as he left it 3 weeks ago. But Marcus wasn't the same man who'd driven away in his Mercedes. Today he wore borrowed clothes that smelled of thrift store dust. His hands, usually soft from desk work, were calloused and dirty. Everything he owned fit into a canvas bag slung over his shoulder. He wasn't here to reclaim his throne. He was here to discover a truth that terrified him more than bankruptcy ever could. If the money disappeared, would the love remain? Marcus Reynolds had spent 28 years building an empire. Construction, real estate, investments that multiplied while he slept. The kind of wealth that opened doors before you knocked, that made strangers remember your name, that turned family gatherings into networking events. But 3 weeks ago, sitting alone in his corner office on the 42nd floor, watching the city lights flicker on like scattered diamonds, Marcus had felt something crack inside his chest. It wasn't a heart attack. It was something worse, a question that wouldn't stay buried. His wife had kissed him goodbye that morning without looking up from her phone. His son had called only to ask about a trust fund transfer. His daughter had sent a text, not about him, but about a charity gala where his presence and his checkbook were expected. Even his brother, the one person who remembered him before the money, had started every recent conversation with a business proposal. Marcus had everything, and he had no idea if anyone actually loved him, or just loved what he could provide. So he made a decision that would change everything. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Marcus grew up in a 2-bedroom apartment in South Boston, where the radiator clanked all night and the walls were so thin you could hear your neighbors' arguments word for word. His father worked double shifts at the docks. His mother cleaned houses in neighborhoods where people had never heard the word budget. He remembered being 7 years old, watching his mother count coins on the kitchen table under the flickering yellow light, her lips moving silently as she calculated whether they could afford both milk and bread that week. That image never left him. Even now, decades later, he could still see the way her shoulders sagged when she realized they'd have to choose. Marcus had made a promise to himself that night, pressed against the cold wall of the bedroom he shared with his younger brother David. His family would never count coins again. They would never choose between necessities. They would never know the specific shame of poverty, the way it made you feel invisible in a world that only saw dollar signs. He kept that promise. After high school, Marcus worked construction during the day and took business classes at night. He slept 4 hours. He saved every dollar. He studied the men who drove nice cars and wore clean suits, watching how they talked, how they moved, how they made people listen. By 25, he had his contractor's license. By 30, he owned his first building. By 40, he had transformed himself into someone his 7-year-old self wouldn't recognize. The money came faster than he'd imagined possible. One project led to 3. 3 led to 12. Investors who'd once ignored his calls now pursued him at cocktail parties. The 2-bedroom apartment became a memory, replaced by the sprawling estate in Winchester with its white columns and circular driveway. His mother never counted coins again. She lived in a renovated townhouse he'd bought her, with a housekeeper who came twice a week. His brother David worked in the family business, managing properties across 3 states. Marcus had given his family everything he'd promised: comfort, security, respect. But somewhere in the climb from poverty to wealth, something had shifted. Family dinners, once loud and chaotic and full of laughter, became scheduled events coordinated by assistants. Conversations that used to meander through dreams and memories now followed agendas. Business opportunities, investment strategies, tax implications. Even his marriage had transformed. He'd met Catherine at a charity gala 15 years ago. She was elegant, educated, perfectly suited to the life he was building. Their wedding had been featured in Boston Magazine. Their home had appeared in Architectural Digest. They moved through life like a power couple from a glossy advertisement, beautiful and successful, and utterly disconnected. Their son James had graduated from Yale with a business degree and immediately joined the family company. But Marcus couldn't remember the last real conversation they'd had, one that didn't involve quarterly reports or portfolio diversification. Their daughter Nicole was 23 and passionate about charitable causes, which Marcus admired. But he'd noticed her passion seemed to peak around fundraising season when his donations made the difference between successful events and failed ones. Then there was David, his brother, the one person who remembered sharing that cramped bedroom, who'd been there for the coin-counting nights and the empty stomach mornings. Even David had changed. Their weekly lunches had slowly transformed from brotherly catch-ups to pitch meetings. Investment opportunities David had discovered, partnerships that required Marcus's capital, ventures that always seemed to need just a little more funding. Marcus never said no. How could he? He built this empire partly for David, to lift him out of the poverty they'd both known. But lately, he'd started to wonder if David saw him as a brother, or as a bank account with a familiar face. 6 months ago, Marcus's mother had passed away quietly in her sleep. The funeral had been enormous, attended by hundreds, business associates, society, friends, people who had never met her but knew Marcus's name. During the reception, Marcus had stood alone for a moment in the corner of the room, watching his family network and socialize, and he'd felt completely isolated. His mother had been the last person who remembered him when he had nothing, the last person whose love he never questioned, and now she was gone. That night, Marcus had sat in his office until dawn, surrounded by the trappings of success, feeling like the poorest man alive. He had a family who depended on him, but did they love him, or did they love the life he provided? The question haunted him through sleepless nights and distracted days. It sat beside him at family gatherings. It whispered during business meetings, where his son pitched aggressive expansion plans. It echoed when his wife discussed the fall social calendar without once asking how he was feeling. Marcus Reynolds had everything a man could want, and he had no idea if any of it was real. The plan took shape slowly, carefully, over weeks of sleepless nights. Marcus contacted his attorney, Gerald, a man he'd known for 20 years and trusted completely. They met in a small coffee shop 40 miles outside the city. Far from anywhere Marcus might be recognized. Gerald listened to the plan with increasing concern, his coffee growing cold as Marcus explained what he wanted to do. Transfer operational control of all businesses to a management trust for 1 month. Arrange for a modest amount of cash to be withdrawn. Create a convincing story of financial collapse. Make it look like Marcus Reynolds had lost everything. Gerald had pushed back naturally. The risk of market panic, the potential damage to business relationships, the emotional toll on Marcus's family. But Marcus had been firm. He needed to know the truth. Gerald had reluctantly agreed, bound by attorney-client privilege and a grudging understanding of what Marcus was really asking. Then Marcus had called an old friend from his construction days, Tommy Chen, who now ran a small contracting business in New Hampshire. Tommy didn't travel in Marcus's current circles. He didn't know Catherine or James or Nicole. He was simply someone who remembered Marcus before the money, who'd worked beside him framing houses in the summer heat. Marcus asked if he could stay at Tommy's place for a few weeks. Tommy had asked only one question. "You in trouble, Marcus?" "No," Marcus had answered. "I'm trying to find out if I am." 3 weeks ago, Marcus had driven away from his estate in his Mercedes. He'd parked it in a long-term garage downtown, removed his Rolex, his wedding ring, his phone, his wallet, with its stack of credit cards. He'd changed into clothes Tommy had provided, worn jeans and a faded work shirt. Then he'd taken a bus to New Hampshire. For 3 weeks, Marcus worked alongside Tommy's crew, framing additions and replacing roofs. His hands blistered, then calloused, his back ached. He ate simple meals and slept on Tommy's couch. He thought about his family constantly, how they were managing, what they were saying, whether anyone truly missed him or just missed what he provided. Tommy never pried, just handed Marcus a hammer each morning and a beer each evening. The work was hard and honest, and reminded Marcus of who he'd been before the empire, before the wealth, when life was difficult but somehow clearer. Now, standing at the gate of his own home, Marcus felt his heart hammering against his ribs. Inside that house were the people he'd built everything for. Today, he would discover what he really meant to them. He pressed the intercom button and waited. The voice that answered was unfamiliar. One of the housekeepers, probably. Someone new. He'd lost track of how many people worked in the house. "Delivery for the Reynolds family," Marcus said, disguising his voice slightly. The gate buzzed open. Marcus walked up the long driveway, that canvas bag heavy on his shoulder. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the lawn. He could hear voices from the backyard. Laughter. The clink of glasses. They were having a gathering. Of course they were. Catherine loved hosting, especially now that summer was settling in. As Marcus rounded the corner of the house, the scene spread before him like a photograph from a lifestyle magazine. 20 or 30 people scattered across the stone patio and manicured lawn. White tablecloths. Catered food. A bartender mixing drinks. Catherine stood near the pool in a cream-colored dress, laughing at something. A woman in expensive sunglasses was saying. James was there too, holding court with several men in polo shirts, probably business associates. Nicole sat with a group of young women, all of them looking at their phones and occasionally glancing up to laugh at something. Marcus's brother David stood near the bar, drink in hand, talking animatedly to someone Marcus didn't recognize. No one noticed him at first. He stood there, dirty and disheveled, completely out of place in this perfect scene. Then a young server walked past and did a double take. Can I help you? She asked, uncertain whether to be polite or alarmed. Marcus cleared his throat. I'm looking for the Reynolds family. The server's eyes narrowed slightly, taking in his appearance. They're, kind of busy right now. Is there something I can help you with? The commotion had drawn attention. Several guests turned to look. Catherine noticed her smile freezing slightly as she registered the stranger on her patio. James saw him next, his expression shifting from curiosity to something harder. David looked over and went completely still, his drink halfway to his lips. Marcus walked forward, and the crowd seemed to part instinctively, maintaining distance. He stopped a few feet from Catherine. The afternoon felt suddenly quiet, despite the number of people present. Catherine's face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Confusion, recognition, shock. Marcus? Her voice came out as barely a whisper. What happened to you? Where have you been? We've been worried sick. James moved closer, his face flushed. Dad? What the hell? You look like you've been living on the street. We called your office. Your phone went straight to voicemail. Gerald wouldn't tell us anything except that you were handling some personal matters. Marcus took a breath, steadying himself for the performance he had to give. I lost it, he said quietly. Everything. The company. The investments. All of it. The silence that followed felt like a physical weight. Lost it? Catherine repeated, her voice rising. What do you mean you lost it? Marcus made himself look defeated, broken. Bad investments. Decisions I thought were sound. Everything collapsed 3 weeks ago. I've been trying to salvage anything, but it's gone. The estate, the business, all of it. I came home because I didn't know where else to go. Nicole had approached now, her face pale. This is a joke, right? Some kind of weird test? Tell me you're joking, Dad. Marcus shook his head. I wish I was. James's face had gone from shock to anger. How could you let this happen? You're supposed to be this brilliant businessman, and you managed to lose everything? David stepped forward, his expression carefully neutral. Marcus, maybe we should talk inside. Away from everyone. Catherine's shock was hardening into something else. Do you have any idea what you have done? What this means? We have obligations, commitments, people are depending on us. Marcus looked at each of them. These people he'd worked so hard to provide for, and felt a cold clarity settling over him. I know, he said quietly. I'm sorry. A woman near the pool, one of Catherine's friends, leaned toward another and whispered something. The whisper spread like ripples across water. Marcus Reynolds lost everything. Can you believe it? How does someone with that much money lose it all? The guests were backing away now, making excuses, remembering other engagements. The party dissolved rapidly, people departing with sympathetic murmurs directed at Catherine while avoiding Marcus's eyes entirely. Within 20 minutes, the patio was empty, except for family. James was pacing now, running his hands through his hair. I just bought a condo in Boston. I have a mortgage. Car payments. You're telling me that's all at risk now? What about my position at the company? Is there even still a company? Catherine stood rigid, her arms crossed. Where exactly have you been staying? Marcus gestured vaguely. With an old friend, working construction to earn some money for food. Construction? Catherine's voice cracked on the word. You've been doing manual labor while we've been here wondering if you were dead. David spoke carefully. Marcus, I think we need to sit down and really understand what happened. Maybe there are assets we can protect, ways to restructure. Marcus watched his brother's face, searching for genuine concern beneath the words. He saw calculation instead. David was already figuring out how to minimize his own losses. Nicole was the only one who hadn't spoken again. She stood apart from the others, her arms wrapped around herself, watching Marcus with an expression he couldn't quite read. Catherine turned to James. Call our attorney. Not Gerald. Someone independent. We need to understand our exposure here. James pulled out his phone immediately. David touched Marcus's arm. Let's go inside. You need to clean up. We need to talk strategy. Marcus let himself be led into the house, this palace he'd built, feeling like a stranger. The marble floors, the crystal chandelier, the artwork on the walls that Catherine had spent months selecting, all of it suddenly felt like a museum. Beautiful, expensive, empty. David steered him toward the kitchen while Catherine and James remained on the patio, talking in low, urgent voices. In the kitchen, David poured 2 glasses of water and handed one to Marcus. Okay, he said quietly. What really happened? Marcus took a drink, the cold water soothing his dry throat. Exactly what I said. Bad investments. A perfect storm of poor decisions. David studied him. You're one of the most careful people I know. This doesn't make sense. Sometimes even careful people fail, Marcus said. David was quiet for a moment. How bad is it? Everything? Gone. The company, the house, the accounts. I have maybe $10,000 left. That's it. David's face went pale. Jesus, Marcus. What about Mom's trust? The properties she left? Those were tied to my holdings. Marcus watched his brother carefully. They're gone too. David sat down heavily on one of the kitchen stools. I can't believe this. I can't process this. Marcus waited, watching. David looked up. What are you going to do? I don't know, Marcus admitted. I came home hoping to figure that out. David nodded slowly. Well, you can stay here, obviously. Until Catherine decides what to do about the house. Marcus felt the words like a slap. Until Catherine decides. Not we'll figure this out together. Not your family, and we'll get through this. Just a clinical assessment of timeline before the inevitable. You should probably think about bankruptcy protection, David continued. Shield yourself from creditors. I can connect you with someone who specializes in that. Thanks, Marcus said quietly. David stood, suddenly restless. I need to make some calls. Check on my own investments. Make sure nothing's at risk. He paused at the kitchen door. I'm sorry this happened, Marcus. I really am. Then he was gone, phone already to his ear. Marcus stood alone in the kitchen, surrounded by granite countertops and professional-grade appliances, and felt the crushing weight of the truth beginning to settle. Catherine appeared in the doorway, her face composed now, the initial shock replaced by cool efficiency. James spoke to our attorney. He's going to review everything tomorrow. We need documentation of what happened. Marcus nodded. Catherine studied him. You'll need to stay in the guest house. I can't have you in the main house looking like that. It wouldn't be appropriate. The guest house. A structure on the property originally built for visiting family. Marcus had paid for it. Built it. Now he needed permission to stay there. Of course, he said. Catherine's expression softened slightly, though it didn't reach her eyes. I don't know what to say, Marcus. This is overwhelming. I understand. Do you? She laughed. A brittle sound. I don't think you do. I've built a life here. A reputation. Social commitments. And now I'm supposed to explain to everyone that my husband lost everything. Marcus felt anger flash through him, hot and sudden. Is that really your concern right now? My embarrassment? Catherine's eyes went cold. Don't you dare judge me. You're the one who destroyed everything. I'm just trying to figure out how to survive the aftermath. She turned and walked away, her heels clicking on the marble floor. The guest house felt like a luxury hotel compared to Tommy's couch, but it might as well have been a prison cell. Marcus sat on the edge of the bed, still wearing his dusty work clothes, and stared at the wall. Through the window, he could see the main house lit up like a beacon. He watched Catherine move past a window, phone pressed to her ear. Damage control. Managing the social fallout. He wondered if she was telling people the truth or crafting a more palatable story. A knock on the door startled him. Come in. Nicole entered, carrying a plate of food and a bottle of water. She set them on the small table without speaking. I'm not hungry, Marcus said. You need to eat anyway. She sat in the chair across from him, studying his face with that same unreadable expression from earlier. Why didn't you call? She asked finally. I couldn't. Nicole's eyes narrowed. That doesn't make sense. Even if you lost everything, you could have found a phone. Called us. Let us know you were okay. You're right, Marcus admitted. I should have, but I was ashamed. Scared. Trying to fix it before I had to admit what happened. That's stupid. We're your family. We could have helped. Could you have? Marcus met her eyes. Really? Nicole was quiet for a long moment. I don't know, she finally said. Maybe not with money, but we could have been there for you. Now everyone's just angry and scared and treating you like a stranger. Marcus felt his throat tighten. I noticed. Nicole stood and walked to the window. Mom's already talking about selling the house. James is panicking about his lifestyle. Uncle David is calculating his losses. She turned back to him. Is it really all gone? Every penny. Marcus nodded. Nicole's face crumpled slightly, just for a second before she composed herself again. What are you going to do? Start over, I guess. From scratch. At 55 years old, Nicole crossed her arms. Will you stay here? I don't think so, Marcus said quietly. I don't think I'm welcome. You're welcome. Nicole said firmly. This is your house. You built it. It doesn't feel like mine anymore. They stood in silence for a while. Then Nicole walked to the door. Eat the food, Dad. Eat the food, Dad, and take a shower. You smell like a construction site. The smallest hint of a smile touched her lips. Marcus felt something warm in his chest, the first genuine moment since he'd returned. Thanks, sweetheart. She paused in the doorway. I'm not going to pretend this doesn't change things. It does. Everything's different now, but you're still my father. That doesn't change. She left before Marcus could respond, pulling the door closed gently behind her. Marcus looked at the plate of food. Chicken. Vegetables. Bread. Simple but thoughtfully prepared. He picked up the fork and took a bite. It tasted like the first real meal he'd had in weeks. After eating, he showered, letting the hot water wash away weeks of construction site grime. He found clean clothes left on the bathroom counter. Old sweatpants and a t-shirt probably from years ago. They were slightly too big now. He'd lost weight. In the mirror, Marcus barely recognized himself. The expensive haircut had grown out shaggy. His face looked older, more lined. The tan from outdoor work made his eyes seem lighter. He looked like the man he'd been 30 years ago. Before the empire, before the wealth. Maybe that was the point. He lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, listening to the silence of the guest house. In the main house, his family slept in rooms he'd provided, in beds he'd bought, under a roof he'd built. And he was here, separated, alone, discovering exactly what he'd feared he would discover. The money had been the foundation of everything. And now that the foundation was supposedly gone, the structure was collapsing. But Nicole's words echoed in his mind. "You're still my father. That doesn't change." One voice, one person. Was that enough? He didn't sleep much that night. Morning came with harsh sunlight through the guest house windows. Marcus woke to find a note slipped under the door. Catherine's handwriting. "Stay out of the main house during the day. I have people coming by and I don't want to explain your situation." The words stung more than they should have. He dressed in the old work clothes and walked the property. The lawn service was there, 3 men with industrial mowers and edgers. They didn't recognize him. He realized he'd never actually met them, just paid the bills. Marcus spent the morning in the garden, pulling weeds that had crept into the flower beds. His hands, already rough from construction work, welcomed the familiar ache of labor. This was real, tangible. Unlike the abstract world of investments and portfolio management, at noon, James appeared on the patio with another man. Marcus recognized him as Peter Chen, a business associate. They were talking intently, James gesturing animatedly. Marcus stayed in the garden, watching. James never once looked his direction. Later, Catherine hosted a lunch on the patio. 6 women Marcus vaguely recognized from various charity boards. He heard their laughter, the clink of glasses, the ease of people whose biggest worry was which fundraiser to attend next. Not once did any of them mention him. It was as if he'd already been erased. David arrived in the afternoon, parking his BMW in the circular driveway like he always had. He went inside without acknowledging Marcus, who was now trimming hedges near the guest house. An hour later, David emerged with James. They stood by David's car, talking in low voices. Marcus watched his brother, this person he had shared a childhood bedroom with, who had been there for every significant moment of his life. David glanced toward the guest house once, just a quick look, then got in his car and drove away. No conversation. No check-in. Just business. That evening, Nicole found him sitting on the guest house steps. "You're doing yard work now?" "Someone has to. The regular crew misses things." She sat beside him. "This is weird, Dad. You being here but not being here." "I know. James won't talk about you. Mom refers to you as the situation. Uncle David came by but didn't even say hello." Marcus absorbed this. Nicole bumped his shoulder gently. "I'm sorry this is happening." "Don't be. It's clarifying." "What does that mean?" "It means I'm learning a lot about what matters and what doesn't." Over the next several days, a pattern emerged. Marcus maintained the property, staying visible but out of the way. He fixed a loose gate, repaired a section of fence, cleaned the pool when the service didn't show. The physical work felt good, honest. Meanwhile, life in the main house continued with barely a ripple from his presence. Catherine hosted dinners. James brought colleagues home. David stopped by frequently, always for business discussions with James or Catherine, never asking to see Marcus. The message was clear. Without money, he was irrelevant. But Nicole checked on him every day, sometimes twice. She brought food, sat with him, asked about his day, told him about hers. They talked more in those few days than they had in years. Real conversations. Not the surface-level exchanges they'd had at scheduled family dinners. She told him about a relationship that had ended badly, about her uncertainty regarding her future career, about feeling lost in a world where everyone seemed to have clear direction. Marcus listened in a way he hadn't before, without the distraction of business concerns, without checking his phone every few minutes, just present, just there. One afternoon, while Marcus was repairing a broken sprinkler, Catherine came outside. She stood a careful distance away. The attorney reviewed everything. She said without preamble, "It's as bad as you said. We'll need to sell the house." Marcus nodded, not looking up from his work. Catherine's voice hardened. "I've started looking at condos, something appropriate for me and Nicole. James has his own place, obviously." Marcus waited. "There won't be room for you?" Catherine continued. "I assume you understand that." He looked up at her then, this woman he'd been married to for 15 years. Her face was perfectly composed. Beautiful. Cold. "I understand," he said. Catherine seemed to expect more of a reaction. When she didn't get it, she shifted uncomfortably. "David has offered to help with some temporary housing. Maybe you could stay with him until you figure things out." "Has he?" Marcus kept his voice neutral. Catherine's expression flickered with something that might have been guilt. This isn't easy for anyone, Marcus. We're all adjusting, of course. She turned to go, then paused. Nicole is getting too attached. Spending too much time out here, it's not healthy. She needs to start accepting the new reality. Marcus felt anger rise in his chest. She's my daughter. I'm glad someone still remembers that. Catherine's face went hard. Don't start with the self-pity. You did this. You destroyed our life. These are just the consequences. She walked away before he could respond. On the 7th day, Marcus sat in the guest house and realized the test was complete. He'd learned everything he needed to know. Catherine saw him as a failed investment, a source of money and status that had run dry. She was already moving on, calculating her next moves. James treated him like a liability, an embarrassment, someone who had failed at the one thing that mattered in their world, maintaining wealth. David, his brother, had revealed himself as someone who only valued Marcus for what he could provide. When the well ran dry, so did the relationship. But Nicole had chosen differently. Every day, she'd shown up, brought food, sat with him, listened, helped. She'd treated him with dignity when everyone else had stripped it away. She'd seen past the money to the person underneath. That evening, Marcus called Gerald on the guest house phone. "It's time," Marcus said. "End it. Are you sure? You said you wanted a full month. I've learned everything I need to learn." Gerald was quiet for a moment. "I'll initiate the paperwork. Everything will be back in your control by tomorrow afternoon." "Thank you, Gerald." "Marcus," Gerald said carefully. "I hope you found what you were looking for." "I did. I'm just not sure I wanted to find it." That night, Marcus asked Catherine to gather the family. There was something he needed to say. She'd agreed with obvious reluctance. They assembled in the main house living room. Catherine on the sofa, James beside her. David in the leather chair Marcus used to favor. Nicole perched on the ottoman, watching her father with concern. Marcus stood in the center of the room, still wearing his work clothes. He pulled a small box from his pocket and set it on the coffee table. His Rolex. His phone. His wedding ring. Catherine stared at the items, her face going pale. "What is this?" "The company isn't gone," Marcus said quietly. The gasps were immediate. James half stood. "What?" "I said the company isn't gone. The investments are fine. Everything's exactly where it was 3 weeks ago." Marcus watched the emotions play across their faces. Confusion, disbelief, dawning understanding. "This was a test," Marcus continued. His voice was steady, but his hands were shaking. "I wanted to know what would happen if everything disappeared, if I lost all the money, if I couldn't provide anymore. I wanted to know who would still be there." Catherine stood, her face flushed. "You're telling me this was fake? All of it? The last week of hell, worrying about losing everything, and you were lying?" Marcus met her eyes. "I wasn't lying about losing something. I lost faith. In my family. In my relationships. In whether anyone actually loved me or just loved my wallet." James exploded. "This is insane. You put us through this as some kind of sick experiment?" David's voice was tight. "Marcus, this is beyond inappropriate. You manipulated all of us." "Did I?" Marcus asked quietly. "Or did I just remove the money and see what remained?" Catherine's hands were clenched at her sides. "How dare you? How dare you question our love, our loyalty? After everything we've built together." "What have we built?" Marcus asked. "Really? Tell me." "A life," Catherine shot back. "A family. A home. Built on what foundation? Money. Every bit of it. And the moment I appeared to have lost that money, everything crumbled." Nicole spoke for the first time, her voice small. "Dad, what are you saying?" Marcus turned to her, and his expression softened. "I'm saying I've spent the last week invisible. Living in the guest house on my own property. Watching my wife host parties, and my son conduct business, and my brother make calculations, and not one of them treated me like family. I was an embarrassment. A problem to be managed. A situation to be minimized." "That's not fair," James protested. "You showed up looking like a homeless person claiming you'd lost everything. What did you expect?" "Compassion," Marcus said, simply. "Support. Some indication that I mattered beyond my bank account." David stood. "This is manipulative and wrong. You can't test people like this and then judge them for failing a test they didn't know they were taking." "Can't I?" Marcus looked at his brother. "You didn't even talk to me, David. Your own brother. You came to the house 4 times this week, and not once did you ask how I was doing. You only wanted to protect your own interests." Catherine's voice shook with rage. "I want you out of this house, tonight. Ditch your things, and leave." "This isn't your house anymore, Catherine. It never stopped being mine." Catherine's face went white. Marcus continued. "For the last 3 weeks, I've been in New Hampshire, working construction and living simply, remembering who I used to be. Meanwhile, I had Gerald monitoring how you all handled my absence." He pulled a folder from inside his jacket and set it on the table. "These are the transcripts of conversations Gerald recorded with each of you about asset protection. About separating your finances from mine. about minimizing your losses. Catherine, you met with a divorce attorney 2 days ago? James, you tried to transfer company funds to your personal accounts. David, you attempted to buy several properties from the company portfolio at a steep discount, using insider information. The room went silent. You were all so busy protecting yourselves that not one of you asked the real question. Where is Marcus? Is he okay? What does he need? Marcus turned to Nicole, and his eyes were shining. Except you. Nicole's face was wet with tears. I just wanted my dad back. I know. Marcus's voice broke. And you were the only one who treated me like I still mattered. You brought me food. You sat with me. You treated me with dignity when everyone else treated me like a burden. Catherine found her voice. So what now? You're going to lord this over us? Punish us for failing your twisted test? No, Marcus said quietly. I'm going to learn from it. Catherine, I want a divorce. You can keep this house. I'll buy something smaller. We'll handle the financials fairly, but I can't stay married to someone who only values me for my net worth. Catherine's face crumpled, but whether from hurt or anger or fear, Marcus couldn't tell. James, you'll need to find a new position. You're fired from the family company. I'll give you a generous severance, but I won't work with someone I can't trust. James opened his mouth to protest, then closed it. David. Marcus looked at his brother. I love you. But you've shown me that you see me as a resource rather than family. I need some distance. I'll honor our existing business arrangements, but I won't be entering any new ones. David's face was stone. Fine. Marcus turned to Nicole. And you? You're the only one who passed. Nicole wiped her eyes. There was no test, Dad. There was just you needing help, and me helping, because that's what you do for people you love. Marcus sat down heavily, suddenly exhausted. That's the lesson, isn't it? Real love doesn't calculate costs. It doesn't protect assets or minimize exposure. It just shows up. He looked around the room at these people who'd been his family. Catherine looked betrayed and furious. James looked angry and defensive. David looked cold and distant. And Nicole looked heartbroken but steady. I'm sorry I tested you, Marcus said. But I'm not sorry I learned the truth. Money reveals character. It shows what people are willing to do, what they're willing to overlook. For 30 years, I thought I was building something meaningful. But I was just building a life where everyone needed my money more than they needed me, except Nicole. She saw past the wealth to the person underneath. And that's worth more than every dollar I've ever earned. Catherine stood. I need you to leave. Tonight. I'll go, Marcus agreed. But understand something. I'm not sorry. This was the most important thing I've ever done, because now I know. Now I finally know. He picked up his phone and watched from the table but left the wedding ring. He walked to Nicole and pulled her into a hug.